here we go. So welcome to our live video chat, Pandemic Prison Ministry, with our guest speakers from both the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction and our community partners that are navigating this time during the pandemic with prison ministry able to continue with their inReach. My name is Reba Collins and I serve the West Ohio Conference as the leader for our All In Community initiative, which is with justice involved individuals from anywhere from victims of crime, pre-arrests, prevention, all the way through post-release. And so we cover the spectrum of re-entry, we cover the spectrum of prison ministry, and we believe very strongly that we cannot do this alone. And so we like to create space for these conversations because we are truly all in this together. And the more that we can connect, the more deeply we can be committed to this work. And it is a commitment, as we all know. So today we are very blessed to have some amazing guest speakers with us today. We have Chris Money. Chris, if you could just wave to everybody. Chris serves as the Executive Director for Kindway. Prior to her current position, which she's been in probably about 4 or 5 years now, I think, Miss Money spent close to 30 years in the correction profession, and she ended up retiring from the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections as when she was warden at Marion Correctional. Kindway's mission is investing in the lives of those impacted by incarceration. They work inside Ohio Reformatory for Women and Marion Correctional Institution, and they help men and women plan and prepare to return to the community about a year and a half prior to their release, their intended release date. And then Kindway provides wraparound services back to Central Ohio with many community partners and churches. And then we have Mike Swiger. Mike, if you'll give a big wave there. Mike serves as our Executive Director for True Freedom Ministries out of Cleveland, Ohio. While a student at Case Western, Mike was convicted as an accomplice to a crime his older brother committed and ended up serving 17 years himself for involuntary manslaughter. While he was incarcerated, he took advantage of the educational programs inside and earned 2 associate's degrees, and he has gone on to graduate from Ohio University with honors with a BA in Business Administration, and then he went on even further to study theology at the Reformed Theological Seminary. Mike is also the author of 5 books, 3 of which appeared on Amazon's bestsellers list. True Freedom Ministries, which Mike is the Executive Director of, is dedicated to reaching Ohio's prisoners, homeless, and addicted with the truth of God's Word and the true freedom found only in Jesus Christ. Prison ministry, their vision is to see every inmate in the state of Ohio to become committed followers of Jesus Christ. So in addition to that, they do homeless ministry, addiction recovery, equipping churches to be in this space of ministry, and then family ministries, because we know that a person just isn't incarcerated on their own. Then we have Blake Tijerina. Blake, if you'll give a nice wave there. Blake serves as a Senior Project Manager for the Ridge Project in McClure, Ohio. For those who don't know where that is, it's just south of Toledo, and it's a rural community. Sorry about that. And where was I? Oh, yes. And Blake and his family experienced firsthand the impact of incarceration on families when his father, Ron, served 15 years during Blake's very formative growing up years. Blake now works with his mother, Kathy, and his father, Ron, at the Ridge Project. And the Ridge Project is a Christian nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering generational responsibility in individuals and improving the lives of families throughout the state of Ohio. Their organization believes that strong families produce strong children who will pass on that legacy of strength to future generations. The Ridge Project runs the Tyro program inside 13 of Ohio state prisons, And I'm told by his mama that one of Blake's specialties is the technology piece of being able to do that. So we're going to really tap into his knowledge of how they have leveraged technology to remain connected inside today. Then we have Chaplain Sylvia Mosley at Dayton Correctional. So, Chaplain Mosley, if you'd please give a wave. Chaplain Mosley is an innovative chaplain that cares deeply about the 820-some women in her care at DCI. She is a student of Dr. Harold Dean Trulier, who created the Healing Communities Framework for congregations to be in healthy, dynamic relationship with justice-involved persons. She's a teacher, a scholar, and is blessed and highly favored by the Lord. Then we have Chaplain Eric Harmon, who serves at Mansfield Correctional. Chaplain Harmon, would you please give a nice wave? Up there, all right. So Chaplain Harmon, prior to his recent career shift, he's pretty new at this chaplain role here. He was walking with returning citizens in the Akron area. He was project director at South Street Ministries in Akron. It is a community reentry organization. He's also a member of the Summit County Reentry Coalition, and he is just very, he just brings the peace and love of God to the over 23,000 persons inside Mancy Correctional. So we are just blessed to have this depth and breadth of experience with our guest speakers today. And again, we thank you all for tapping in and being a part of this discussion. So I would like to just start out with just acknowledging that before the pandemic hit, right, we were all just kind of clicking along. I think at least that's what I was experiencing in my area of ministry. And we were clicking along. We were making those adjustments here and there that make our programs better, that make our ministries better for those we serve. We also know that partnering with the ODRC, for the many of us who are on this call do, that requires extreme flexibility, because they're always adjusting, right, to the needs of those in their care and external influences like new legislation, practices, policy changes due to leadership. Everything is very dynamic, particularly in this area of ministry. And then the pandemic hit, right? And it hit. And we all just kind of had to stop what we were doing, stop how we were serving. And now I think we're all starting to start back up and working through the uncertainty with a whole lot of firsts. I don't know about you, but the churches and the groups I work with and the individuals I work with and the men and women returning home that we work with, there's a lot of firsts that are happening. And so part of our discussion today is to talk and pick the brains of our experts here and help and see how they have navigated, and hopefully we can all come away a little wiser, a little better prepared for what comes next as we roll back into ministry in new ways. So I would just like to pose questions to Miss Money, to Blake, and to Mike about what would each of you walk us through kind of your process for resuming some level of service inside ODRC, inside the institutions. What were the priorities that you set? Who did you connect with first? What were your initial challenges and how did you overcome them? So I'm going to start with Miss Money. If you would just kind of walk us through kind of how you got to where you are right now.
I maintained contact with the deputy wardens of special services, Miss Jefferson and Randon Watson over at Marion, and stayed pretty connected with them. The first thing we wanted to do is to let people inside, not just the people in our program, but all the inmates at both facilities that we serve and the staff, to know that we were praying for them. So the first thing we did was send posters in for every single housing unit. It was a prayer circle of one of our winter gatherings where we could gather, and we let people know, both staff and inmates, that they were being covered in prayer. We also wanted to send some encouraging messages to staff at ORW. So churches and some of our volunteers, actually mostly our church partners, did banners to hang up in the hallways that, you know, we thank you for being first responders and we're praying for you. So we sent those in. I had talked to some staff at Marion and asked, you know, what were some needs there, particularly when they became kind of the epicenter of all of this. And one of the things that we heard from staff was that a lot of the staff was working double shifts as more and more staff were getting sick. So we sent in 2,000 snack items. We raised some funds amongst our supporters and sent those into the employees. We then solicited, because we keep getting our volunteers, which are about 80, our volunteer base kept asking, what can we do? We want to do something. So we collected 2,400 cards for the women at ORW. We've done some videos to send in to MCI because they have a closed circuit TV system. And this week, the other thing that we were told at Marion was that they could use hygiene items. So we did a little fundraiser and sent in 2,400 packages of hygiene that were delivered this week. We recently got approved to send in newsletters to our participants and Embark inside both in Marion, and we're waiting for approval at ORW. The biggest thing, the big challenge was we're in finishing up our 10th season of Embark at both locations, and it got shut down mid-March. We finish at the end of May, so we had several weeks left. So we are now working on, at both institutions, staff who are helping coordinate with our inside facilitators to finish up season number 9 at both locations. So that's going on, and that's going really well. We continue to prepare people. We're allowed to call in to a staff member and continue to prepare our men and women for their upcoming parole board hearings. We still go to their family conferences. Sometimes it's Zoom, sometimes it's on the phone, occasionally it's in person. We're working on transition plans for our people that get paroled and are coming out. We're attending in-person full board parole hearings. We have almost 20 men and women in 2020 going to the parole board. So that still goes, and people are still coming out, transitioning out to either halfway houses or transitioning out to the community. So we're still helping. We moved a woman into her first apartment on Sunday. So we're still working in the community like we always have, and just having to be a little bit creative, trying to reach in. So that's kind of where we stand right now.
Thank you for that. I know in a previous conversation you and I had, how many months did it take you to get to the point where you could deliver the hygiene product?
Well, there was a lot of challenges. It's not really easy. It sounded like a really good idea to begin with, but it's challenging to buy 2,500 body washes, and it had to ship across the country, and we started, I think, in April when they really needed it, and it literally got delivered literally delivered it this week. So it was a little bit more challenging than we anticipated for a whole lot of different reasons, but it finally happened. So
that's good. That's great. So Mike, if you could also answer the same question, just kind of walk through your process and where you are now.
Thank you very much. Very similarly, the first thing we did was reach out to all of our contacts in the prisons where we were doing services on a regular basis. We do major services across the state, but there's only 9 prisons we're in 1 or 2 or 3 times a week. So we reached out to all those chaplains, all the wardens, all the deputy wardens to find out what we were allowed to do and how we could help and not get in their way initially. So we had a lot of men who were reaching out to us by mail. So we bolstered our pen pal program. So instead of writing a couple dozen letters a week, our pen pals started writing hundreds of letters a week because that was our first point of touch with our population. We also started talking to the chaplains about the possibility of using technology to reach into the prison system. So as I think you've all experienced, it's a vast array of levels of technology that date back to the 70s. It's in the prison system, so it's difficult to try to find something that'd be uniform. So we started creating videos, digital videos, to do devotional messages and full-length sermons to send in to the guys that was geared towards them during this season. So we started creating DVDs, which then we ended up using for Facebook as well, and we do a Facebook Live. So some of the messages that were geared to, all the messages geared to the prisoners are now being viewed on the streets, and we're getting about 30,000 views a month throughout the course of things we're offering. So it actually has expanded our audience, and hopefully is raising more awareness of what we do inside the prison system. We also start looking at the practical needs, because we are immediately stopped all of our programming across the state. We lost a personal connection, so we wanted to find out how we could be of assistance, like Christine was just talking about, to the system practically. So what we were getting feedback was the guys are locked in the buildings and they're bored. Can you provide board games and card games and things of practical use? So we did a
running into technical difficulty with Mike. So Mike, if you can hear us, we cannot hear you. As he works that out, Blake, I'm going to kick it over to you then, to kind of ask the same question. And I love your setup, by the way. You got your headphones. I mean, you're all tech man here, I can tell.
Thank you. All right, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So for us, what we did when it kind of started, I kind of, right before everything went, I was instantly in the meetings and the rooms going, okay, we got to prep there. If this continues, we're not going to be able to get in. And so we started doing different things right away, contacting early, trying to get on their bridge network. All the prisons do have what they call the bridge. And that is how they do their video conferencing from either institution to institution or from institution to the courtroom if they need to. And so we were quick to reach out to our contacts and see who would allow us to utilize their bridge, so we could begin to develop, do on live classes, basically the facilitator, kind of like we're doing right now through Zoom. That has its own challenges due to the bridge is a closed circuit. And so if there's any issues or troubleshooting, you can't really do them on your end. It's all on their end. But that seems to be pretty well. A few, and then we've, because Zoom's not really, they can't use Zoom right now. They're trying to look into other things. I know Microsoft Teams is starting to become very popular. And so we integrated Microsoft Teams into the Ridge project back in September, October of last year. And that's becoming a really go-to with not only the prisons, but also the DYS facilities in Ohio. As we work with them as well. So Teams is becoming an alternative very quickly. I'm hoping Zoom, as they begin to roll out their safety protocols and passwords and things, will also become an option. So as we reached out, it was vastly different because we're in prisons, we're in juvenile detention centers, we're in DYS facilities, and we're in like county jails and county halfway houses basically. And so they all run at a different standard. There isn't like one thing that's like, oh, this is going to work for them all. And so when it came to the institutions, we also had peer facilitators. And so we were able to kind of just stay in contact, get them the paperwork. They could do the stuff, get it back to us. We could approve, they could begin their classes. We also, whatever institutions that we were able to form a relationship with and allowed us to do JPay, we could send JPay messages to them, which was really vital because we work with the Job and Family Services down in Southern Ohio. And throughout this entire pandemic, people are still being released. People are still coming home. When their sentence is up, their sentence is up. And so that's what some people, we noticed that some people were like, weren't prepared for that. And so the JPay allowed us to stay in contact with them knowing, hey, you're going to be coming home. Here's some resources that are still available, that are still open, or here's the number you need to call because right now they're not open, but this number is still available for you to reach them. Because that's vital, because as they come home, they also are still needing to get those resources. A pandemic doesn't stop them from coming home. It doesn't stop them from needing a job. It doesn't, everything's still rolling. Yes, it's different. So we have to work with that so that way they can succeed. When it comes to what else we're doing, we offer we're on Securus tablets, which are throughout the state of Ohio. We have our Tyro TV on there. And then that just got spread through the country, which has been very helpful to us. So we're spreading out as far as we can. Our reach is getting out there as the pandemic isn't just Ohio, but nationwide. Places are looking for things. So yes, the institutions, we are back into one right now. They're doing the peer facilitating. Most of them, because we either offer like online classes or peer facilitation, but they're just not allowing anybody to get together. And so right now we've been kind of just offering what we're able to offer, which is the Tyro TV, which is like a 30-minute talk show based on things that are relevant to them and things that they can do to continue striving for that next step in their life. When it comes to Department of Youth Services, we have our youth program that's on demand, and they're able to log in. They have computers there that can log in, and they're set up a little bit differently. When it comes to the Worth Center, which is like a treatment center, or local jails, they have actually opened the doors for Zoom meetings and Zoom conferences. So we're able to utilize that to be able to deliver our classes live at their time. So basically, if 7 p.m. works for them, that's what's going to work for us. We've become really, really flexible in all of this as well, making sure that we're accommodating to them, because we know in this time they still want the programming. They're still trying to do better, and we don't want to by any means shut that down just because, we wanted to work that typical 9 to 5 or, 8 to 4. We're like, no, we're here for you guys because we want to make you better. So we've done 7 p.m., 8 p.m. classes, 8 a.m. classes. Really, it's just like what works for the institution or for that group to really just really be flexible in all this. And I know as it started, the bridge was working. They could hold classes, and then it went to classes no more than like 9. And then all of a sudden it went to, hey, we can't have classes. They're stuck in their unit. So we've been really, really, the biggest thing we learned from this is just to swing, just to be able to shift. And as Richard Swinger, who I just let me know, we've also partnered with Ministries to do outside support events. So praying for partners in Youngstown. We've supported with a lot of outside ministries and organizations to really be able to either help them swing in the direction they need to swing in if they need, they need help, or they've been able to help us. But we've just been very willing. And really what I say is you just got to be able to pivot at a moment's notice. You could be running smooth starting Monday, and then Wednesday, all of a sudden something comes in, and all of a sudden you're like, well, that's not going to work anymore. What can we do? And you kind of are going with the river. You're just, you just got to make sure you're not getting, you're kind of avoiding the rocks, but going with everything. So that way you're able to still reach and deliver. But yes, I would definitely say for anybody that's kind of out there, begin to look into Microsoft Teams. It seems to be something that a lot of places are moving to, and stay within Zoom and continue to use that. But yeah, like now we're launching we usually do a Catch with Dad event where we do the Toledo Mud Hens and then a game, and then afterwards they go out in the field. But all minor league baseball was canceled this year, so we're doing like a virtual Catch with Dad where we send them like a ball, and then they can go outside and play with their kids for the guys on the outside. So we're doing everything that we're able to kind of do, and it's been a learning experience. So it's like as we do something that's successful, we're like, okay, let's document how that was successful. If we do something that wasn't so successful, it's like, let's document how that, what might not have worked there. Yeah. Or if it's like, hey, it was going well until this came in, we document what happened that caused it to derail. That way, documentation is king right now, and that way you not only have it for your funders, but you have it for yourself, and you're ready to go if something were to. And I know Ohio is experiencing another uptick, so we don't really know where we're going to be in the next couple of months. But as we've gone through this, we kind of begin to brace ourselves and know, hey, this worked last time, Right. So that's really where we've been at, and it's been good. It's been helpful partnering with as many people as we can, outside ministries, other job and family services, working with the court systems, working with the probation officers, because again, guys are coming home and they're still needing help as well. And still with our point of contacts, maintaining that point of contact, also understanding, another thing is understanding that the institutions are under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure because this is something they've never dealt with. And so not being pushy or not being, too, not constantly asking for something, but just being like, hey, we're here. We just wanted to remind you that we're here. Let us know what you need, whatever that might be. And I know we've delivered some sanitary products and masks and things like that to institutions as well that we're in. And really what it's all about is just being able and reminding them, hey, we're here.
And getting off of there.
And so, all right. It looks like Roger's trying to come back on.
Yep. So, so Mike, you're back on. So if we could swing back over to you. Thank you, Blake, for that really helpful and insightful stuff. Yes, definitely. So Mike, you were talking, and then you got interrupted, and you're on mute. There you go.
I'm blaming Richard Swiger for that because I think he gonged me.
Oh.
Sorry for dropping off. That's the first time I've had a problem with the Zoom connection. But yes, we were following what I heard both Blake and Christine talk about is trying to be very flexible. Something that happened during our last conference we had on this meeting a few weeks ago actually affected how we started changing our programming vision. I think it was Mike Davis was talking about since we can't reach into those who are inside the facility, we should focus on those who are on the outside.
Yeah.
So we used to do a weekly meeting for reentry in the inner city of Cleveland. We would get between 50 and 80 participants who come out, which had to shut down. Cleveland's a hot spot. We had the CDC limits of only 10 people. So one thing we had a strategic session after that last conference that you guys hosted. How can we minister to our folks that we do have access to who've already been released?
Yeah.
So instead of having once a week meeting with 70 people, we started breaking into smaller groups. So now we offer programming 5 nights a week at 6:30, and we broke the components into separate parts. So on Monday, we do a Stepping Up Manhood Initiative. Tuesday nights, we do the financial literacy class. Wednesday nights, we're doing an AA program. Thursday, we're doing our normal Reformers Unanimous. And on Friday, we're having discipleship and expositional Bible teaching, different instructors. So instead of having a large group doing all things at one time, we segmented our pieces so we can meet smaller groups of people where they had the largest need. So this Zoom conference meeting last time helped restructure what we're doing. We're also taking this time to dig into and do training for our volunteers. We still have access to our volunteers. We're very much a volunteer-driven organization. And as you guys know, when you're sprinting along, doing all the programming and classes, and you're sending people out, you don't have a lot of time to build into your own team members. So we started a weekly meeting for our volunteers, and we're having a couple of Bible conferences. One of our chaplains is a walk through the Bible instructor. So we're holding 2 seminars in the next couple of weeks for our volunteers to brush up on their skills. So aside from reaching out to the prisoners through the areas where we have some opportunities, we're also taking this time to build into our own organization, streamline some things that needed to be addressed to make us more available once we go back into the prisons. This took I'm sure same thing with everybody, it stopped everything on the dime. But what it also did for a lot of our community partners, we were on a work release program. We take people out of prison during the last 90 days, 6 months of incarceration, and that was really expanding. And I know this is a once in a generation event we're going through right now, but we've had a community partner who was really relying on our guys. We had a 100% placement rate for all the guys who were getting out working at that company, who took a big step back from us to say that our guys were working very well. They were hiring upon release. And they were beginning to build their own business model on hiring ex-offenders. And they said this taught them or demonstrated to them this is not a population that you can rely on if you're still incarcerated. Because this event, or it could be a riot, or it could be some other things that would automatically just stop down a program that hurt them. So we're having to now rethink how we're doing our work release program so that employers who are partnering with us don't get put in the same position again. So this is certainly an unusual time. As far as the other 2 areas of our outreach that also overlap with the prison, with the homeless ministry, we're still providing food to the shelters, but we can't distribute it ourselves. But through some creative networking, we came across a program that some of you groups may want to consider. It's called From Farms to Families. It's a USDA program funded by the federal government. And if you reach out to local produce vendors who could possibly be partners, they provide 11-pound boxes of produce or 22-pound boxes of produce that has to be distributed through a nonprofit to anybody in your network. So right now we're distributing 2,500 pounds of fresh produce and vegetables and fruits every week in the city of Cleveland. the boxes have apples, oranges, celery, carrots, onions, potatoes. And because our office is in sort of a produce desert, so to speak, we're able to distribute not just to our people, but to the neighborhoods as well. So this is allowing us to kind of push out on the edge of our mission field. Since we're not spending so much time in the prisons, we can reach out to those around our physical locations. So it's a way to maybe take your efforts, energy, and your capacity and aim them in a different direction to those closest to you on the streets. Also recognizing, like Christine said, that the correctional workers are also frontline workers. You know, we see on TV quite a bit, there's a lot of support for people in the medical community who are frontline responders. But especially what happened in Marion, those correctional officers had to go right into the heart of the epicenter of Ohio. So we partnered with a company called Green Circle Growers, and we did a staff appreciation day. We distributed over 2,500 orchids to the employees of 7 institutions in early May, just to say thank you. And that while maybe the society in large doesn't see you as first line responders, we do, and we're grateful for what they do. So we're trying to be creative, try to encourage everyone along the chain that we touch, and then adjust the circumstances. As you guys have seen, the governor continues to change some of the variables, the CDC changed the variables. So on our daily reentry programming, we're doing all the things that were required. You know, 8 participants, 2 leaders, we're wearing masks, we had the thermal scanner wands to make sure everyone feels comfortable, because I'm sure as you've all experienced, people are all across the entire spectrum of how they feel about the pandemic and how it's being regulated. So we want to be open to those who are hyper conservative and really fearful of what's going on. And we have those who you have to pretty much wrestle them to the ground to put a mask on them, but you have to be able to make everyone feel comfortable as you're trying to minister to them.
Well, thank all 3 of you for such rich discussion. I'm blown away by just the level of work that you're doing and just the insights that you provide. Thank you so much for that. Very quickly, and then I'm going to pivot to our chaplains, because we've kind of talked about the technology, unless either Chris or Mike, if you have anything else to add to the technology, but I thought Blake did a phenomenal job of kind of giving us what our options are with technology and how to navigate that. If you want to, you're good? Thumbs up? All right. So this is a question, and all 3 of you have talked about needing to pivot, needing to reach out, and almost like reach side to side, and also forward, right? Who's on your left that's in the community that you can serve and help? Who's on your right that's within the correctional institutions that you can serve and help? And then forward, who is going to continue to need help moving forward? So all this can sometimes just make us dizzy. And what do we do next? And where do we go next? What's that next big priority? So if each of you could just very briefly answer, what are the core organizational values that you've really leaned into that are guiding you in your decision making and in where you put your efforts?
I think that one of the things that we have done is to try to stay Christ-centered, and we have spent time in prayer. We've had Zoom prayer meetings. We've just tried to stay that as the core. And when we do that, we realize that it's not our agenda. It has more to do with being flexible and what are the needs of the correctional staff and the offenders as well. And as far as thinking about where to go next, we are looking at, because we have so many people in the community, to really upgrade our services in the community. And we realize that we need to work on and improve having our participants stay connected in the recovery community, which of course has been challenging. We had an unfortunate situation. One of our women overdosed and died, and she was in her 30s, and she became isolated and lost her job. And even though there were people in contact with her, she ultimately overdosed. And so we thought, from that, we just really looking at how at risk some of our people are, not assuming everybody's okay just when you call and say, oh yeah, I'm fine. So we really changed how we are engaging with the people right now. And then looking at what's causing people to reoffend. Many times people, men and women, have made very unhealthy relationships. In fact, that kind of so we're looking at a licensed social worker volunteer that just retired, and she said, may I please put together some training on that? So we're really pivoting to say, okay, how can we better serve the people who are already out? What are the challenges that they're facing? And then the other thing we're looking at is if we can't get back into the prison anytime soon, we're looking at possibly doing an embark with returning citizens who are already out. You know, prepare, even though they're already out, we didn't prepare them inside. There's people outside that are struggling that are not part of our program. So we're going to do an outreach and see who's around that we might be able to serve, and that might be our next season instead of being inside.
Great, thank you. Mike?
For us, very similar to Christine, you know, our vision and our belief, core belief, is that Jesus Christ changes lives, and that the Word of God is living and active and is the absolute foundation and compass for changing our behavior. So we're trying to take those core values and apply them in very practical ways as we can, through the DVDs we're sending in, through the one of the things when I got cut off last time, we're doing a virtual correspondence Bible course with our participants. So at Richland Correctional, for instance, we have a volunteer who's writing curriculum, sends the questions in, the inmates answer the questions, get sent, they get graded. So we're trying to continue our core belief while we're trying to be flexible. We had an incident this past week that kind of showed why you have to be looking for the people God put in front of you. We have an office in Cleveland. We have a sign out in front, and we had a knock on the door, and there was a mother and father whose son had overdosed and died. Our office is across the street from the cemetery, and they were having a service and had no one to say anything at this private service for them. And one of our chaplains walked across the street with them and was able to share the gospel as a part of their service. So we're seeing the same thing in Cleveland. A lot of overdoses, people who are isolating, people who can't go to programming. We had folks overdose in our program. But on the brighter side, we've had 5 people we've been able to place, or 3 people, I believe, we've been able to place at our long-term inpatient program in North Carolina as a partnership, because people who ordinarily would not go have nothing else to fall back on as excuses now why they shouldn't go. So this is also working as a help. We're also looking to take the capacity we have and look to other places close by. We found another transitional housing center. It's a faith-based organization that we're able to provide our programming for with their people. So instead of going to Grafton to do the reintegration programming, the mentoring, and the addiction recovery programming, we're having those folks brought by vans over to our office. So we're able, like Christine was saying, offer the same programming, but to a different population who are ex-offenders as opposed to current offenders. And I don't want to put Mike Davis or Gary Croft on the spot. I know you guys are on the call, but before we finish up, if you guys could give us just a general outline of, we should expect to go back to prison, not this year, next quarter, just so we can begin trying to change our compass and have a strategy going forward. Maybe Chaplain Mosley can share that as well. But yeah, the unknown is hard because we're planning for short-term changes because we don't know when we can go back to what we were doing.
Yeah, and we'll get to that with our chaplains hopefully as well. So thanks for putting Mike and Gary on the spot too. Blake, quickly, core values.
So our core values have really always been building a legacy of strong families and just bettering those that we come in contact with. Our ultimate goal is to make everybody better than we are. That's when we know we're being successful. And so we haven't really changed that. We've really stuck to that. That's why we are pivoted every step of the way through this to make sure that we're building that legacy of strong families, that we're making sure that, you know, if they need help, we are there to help them in any way we're able to. And it's been really difficult during the pandemic to be able to do that, but we've been striving with that, whatever we're able to, you know, whether it's meeting up with somebody through one of our grants, you know, with a mask in hand to give them their incentives, or to help them with their job application. You know, it just kind of varies, and it's a case-by-case process, because I know we're doing our DOL grant in Cuyahoga County in Cleveland, which has been hit pretty hard, and so that's been a struggle in itself. You know, we're also in the Dayton area and the Worcester area. We're in Columbus area, so we've kind of seen and then where we're at in Northwest Ohio, where I'm at, like Henry County, so it's it's a little different than the other places, but we do our goals haven't changed, our mindset hasn't changed. You know, we're really just there for them.
Thank you all. All right, so now we're going to pivot to our chaplains. And our chaplains went back inside just a few weeks ago, and they are actually the first ones back in since everybody was since the big shutdown occurred. And so they are the first on the scene in the mission field, so to speak. And so I would just pose a couple questions to Chaplain Mosley and Chaplain Harmon. Would each of you just kind of share what you're noticing in regards to the needs of the men and the women right now inside? And just to be transparent, Chaplain Harmon and Chaplain Mosley and I had a conversation with Mike and Gary about a week or so ago, and it was really interesting to hear the two chaplains ask each other, how are you experiencing things inside your institution? Because we're talking men and women, and they respond differently, right? So Chaplain Moseley, let's just start with you. What are some of the things you're noticing with your women inside Dayton Correctional, some of the needs they have?
Okay. Hi to everyone, and thank you for all that I've heard. I'm just really blessed by just the work that's being done by everyone. As I've come back into the prison, and the women, you are greatly missed, greatly missed. When are we having Bible studies? When are the volunteers coming back? When are we having church? And so there is a void. There is a spiritual void here that the volunteers were feeling that is noticeable. And it's noticeable in the behavior of the women here. Women are very relational. And because they are relational, they get into relationships with each other here, which leads to fighting in a lot of instances. And so we have a fighting. What some of the women have shared with me is that the women will go in their cells and fight so that they won't be on camera. So I don't even know that we're able to capture accurately how much violence is going on, because, and when I was at the men's prison, it was the same thing. Men could go behind the building or go someplace else, and it was considered manly to go somewhere, and men would just duke it out and settle it among themselves. And so I don't know that we really ever have had a very good idea of what the level of violence is in the prison. Certainly, our statistics tell us, and I think we have to understand science drives a lot of what we should be thinking about and doing, that at least in the prison here, 67% of the women here are here because of drug addiction. So we have a population that's drug addicted. We also have half of our population is on a mental health caseload. And so we have drug addicted women. We have women that have dealt with trauma, dealing with PTSD, that are on medication, that had some of these relationships with our volunteers and programs that now have been abruptly taken away. And so they don't have anything to fill that, which makes it very difficult for them. We have high levels of depression. And so as the chaplain and working with the deputy warden of special services, unit manager, case managers, we are trying to find ways to reach out to them and to do that. And so we've gotten quite a bit of support from the ministries, where they provided us with DVDs to show, and they see that on television when we have DCI TV. And so we're grateful for that. We're putting things on JPay, uplifting Bible studies, uplifting spiritual messages to them. And because as a chaplain, I have to reach out to all of the faith beliefs. We're getting messages for the pagans, as well as for Jehovah's Witnesses, as well as for the Muslim inmates, because they all have spiritual needs. And so having to be able to reach out and try to provide for all of those needs. But again, it's difficult for the women to be able to deal with this new normal now, with not having, being able to come to the chapel and have a church service in the chapel or Bible study. It's very difficult for them. And so we're just trying to find ways to reach in and to encourage them. So prayer is always needed. Please pray, pray, pray for us. That is always needed. And we just know that you are greatly, greatly missed by the women here. And I would suspect that Chaplain Harmon would say the same thing.
Thank you, Chaplain Mosley. Chaplain Harmon, what are you experiencing? What are you seeing inside? You need to, could you unmute? Thank you.
We're all learning so much about technology. So much. So yeah, Chaplain Mosley, I really appreciate it. As we were getting together again as chaplains and starting to talk about going back into the institution, you know, Chaplain Mosley was pretty quick and sensitive to the mood of the inmates and, you know, what were they going through? Because that's ultimately who we're there to serve is them. And I can tell you all this as volunteers, you guys are so important, and you guys want to know when we're coming back in. And one of the biggest questions that we're getting from the inmates is, when are you coming back in? So that's probably, I'm sure Chaplain Mosley gets stopped on the yard about as much as I do about that. And, you know, it's always, we just don't know. We just don't know. And, you know, spending a few minutes and talking with the inmate that asked those questions about their family and whatnot. And just reminding the guys too, that it's really not a whole lot different as far as the inside and the outside. I haven't been to my church since before the pandemic. So I've still yet to go inside a physical church building. I was reminding them of that. Yeah, our guys at Mancy, you know, going to church services, going to religious Bible study, you guys as while us chaplains are there and we're approachable and we try to remain relatable, we're still kind of seen as part of the institution. So when volunteers come out of their way without pay, in the way that you guys come in faithfully every week, gosh, I think it was Gary Coley said the hardest thing about prison ministry is getting in. And now we as chaplains get to know what that was like. I thought I was going to have to break a window or climb the fence to get back into Mancy. But now we know what it's like to try to get in. Just reminding the guys that, hey, our volunteers want to get back in really bad. Get lots of phone calls and emails about it. And I think the things that, like what Mike was talking about, and Christine and others, but those small ways of reaching out mean so much. And really, actually, some of them weren't small. I mean, sending those boxes and whatnot, that's pretty bad. That's pretty big. That does mean a lot. With that being said, I was surprised. I wrote over 40 guys while I was away, and I got about 2 responses from guys. So if you're writing, but when I got back into the facility, I had almost all 40 of them come up to me and say, "Hey, thanks for writing." And I'm like, "Well, why don't you write me back?" But even if you're not hearing back from them, it's still making impact, because we can assume what the guys are going through, but until we sit down and ask them, we just don't know. So that's what I've been kind of doing, is saying, "Hey, what can we do for you guys? What do you need right now? What would be helpful? If you were in my position, what would you do to get the juices flowing again?" And, you know, when you put that question in someone's lap, you know, it forces them to work through the realities of that as well. And, you know, just those letters, the videos that you can provide, those are big. Yeah, men tend to handle things a little bit different than the women. Again, our guys have probably withdrawn a bit more. Our violence has seemed to have gone down a bit. I mean, they're always going to fight about something. But it's interesting to observe that. And again, I think that's because their schedules were so, being a level 3 prison, guys need to find ways to keep themselves busy. It's not like they're in a 4 or 5 and they're just in their cell all day. Those are really important. But I think our guys have become somewhat withdrawn. Just not as, again, like I wrote 40 some letters and hardly heard anything back. But it still meant something to them. Not fighting as much. I think it was really important to understand too, is that just because we can't get in, well, we couldn't get in for a while and the volunteers still can't get in, is that God's work really goes on. It took me, we've been back about 4 weeks. It took me about 2 weeks to get back into the swing of things. I was able to get some guys in my office, and just this week hearing some of the stories about the work God's doing, even in our absence, it's just really encouraging. You know, I think about when, the Communist Party was coming more into power in China. They kicked out all the missionaries, and the missionaries lamented, you know, like, this is the end of Christianity in China. But when things started to open up again, you find there's 50 million, one of the fastest growing churches in the world. So just because we can't be there, one of the best things we can do, whether we're there or we're not, is just pray. Anyone that's been a minister for, I don't know, a couple of weeks really knows that, you know, we can provide all of this awesome programming, and we should. We can be present. We can do so many things, but nothing touches the heart like the work of the Holy Spirit and just praying for our people. That really makes the impact. Just the testimonies I heard of what God was doing while I was away, it just really blessed me. It reminded me that I'm called, but I'm really not all that important. God's going to do what he does with or without me. So yeah, that's kind of where they're at right now.
Thank you both for such incredible insight. And I know in a previous conversation, Chaplain Mosley, you mentioned that for the women, one of the big relational areas they have are their families and their children. Yes. And so if you could just elaborate just a little bit on that and maybe bridge that to what do you think faith communities and people that care about those women on the inside could do to support their families on the outside, so that the women know that, you know, that somebody is looking out for their kids.
Well, and I think that's important to understand that there are two different dynamics going on as far as women and their families. Some of them have close relationships with their families, and we've been doing Angel Tree right now with Prison Fellowship, having them fill out applications for Angel Tree. Also providing, whenever possible, with the women, having them come down to the chapel, allowing them to make phone calls to be able to call home because they cannot have visits. But it's also important to recognize that there are women that are estranged from their families because, again, going back to the issue that we deal with is drug addiction. Crime usually starts in the circle that's closest to you. You don't go outside of your community and commit crimes until you've first exhausted everyone inside of your community. And so there are families that really don't want to have anything to do with them because they started stealing from them first. And so I think one of the things that's been on my heart in terms of ministry in the church and ministry in particularly prison ministries, that while they're not able to come in, reaching out to crime victims is so important because people that have been victimized are not necessarily all that eager to want to see the church go into the prison. They're still hurting from having been victimized, and until our ministries reach out and in And that's a part of what healing ministry does, is it reaches out to the crime victim. That's a basic tenet of restorative justice, is that we have to reach the hurting people that are sitting in our congregations that have been hurt, recognizing that many times the people, our returning citizens, have also been crime victims as well. They're one of the same. Their family members many times have been victims of crime because they started their journey inside the family first before they reached out and were convicted of a crime and sent to prison. And so I think it's important to recognize that not only are they family members, but they also are people who have been victimized and hurt by crime. And maybe that's something that our volunteers, while you cannot come in, that's something that you can look at expanding the ministry on the outside to just be very intentional about, let's reach out to people that have been, have suffered from domestic violence or have been victims of crime, and the families of people that are returning citizens. We have women that have lost their children. And that is so heartbreaking for many of the women here. I think some of it, when we look at where the anger and the violence comes from, we have women who have been pregnant and have had their children taken away from them and pretty much given to strangers because there have been family members that had felonies. Because they had a felony, they could not take the child. So the child was adopted out, a newborn baby adopted out. This woman did not have any other children. This was her first child. And that child was adopted out. And the judge said to her, well, when the child is 18, the child will be able to find you if the child wants to. That type of pain and anger is something that I just cannot imagine. And so needless to say that that young woman has been in trouble since she's been here in the prison. I say that to say that if we want to look at places where we can be effective, we have to be a holistic prison ministry, and legislative change is important. We still have collateral sanctions that impact them when they come out. We still have the mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines. There's still the disparity between powder cocaine and crack cocaine. And all of these things impact our returning citizens when they come out of prison. That one of the things that I have to look at is how can we help them? And I'm glad I heard about training volunteers, but I'm surprised at the number of volunteers who've never heard of collateral sanctions, have no idea what collateral sanctions are. And these are things that directly impact the lives of the returning citizens coming out of prison. Collateral sanctions. There was a time in our country where when someone came out of prison, the slate was wiped clean and they were able to start over. That's not the case anymore with collateral sanctions. And so I think it's important for our volunteers to understand that addiction is a brain disease. It's not just say no. And learning about the 12 steps and how the steps help them develop a relationship with God. 26 years ago, I was a using addict, and it was a 12-step program that got a using addict that was angry with God because everyone that I love had died from drugs and alcohol. And I was told by a chaplain when I was in the military that the reason my husband was dead was because God needed another flower in his garden. Now I've got a 6-month-old baby and I'm 3,000 miles away from home. And you tell me that God took my husband because he wanted a flower in his garden. And so the anger that I had with God and the anger that I had as people in my family died from addiction, I needed a place where I could safely process that without feeling like I was wrong. And it was in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous that I was able to do that. I was in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that I was able to do that. So it really offends me when I have volunteers come in here and tell inmates, well, all you need is Jesus. You don't need no 12-step program. And that, I think, is one of the most hurtful things, because I'm seeing it in my community. I'm very connected to the recovery community here in Dayton. And because of the pandemic, people that had gone through drug court successfully, had gotten out and was doing well, and they were working, and now all of that's gone, have relapsed and have overdosed and died. And this is something that's really critical in this community. And so we really need volunteers that understand that addiction is threefold: mind, body, and spirit. It's a brain disease, it's a spiritual disease, but it's also physical. And we need to teach that and to help them understand how to best reach out to the men and women inside of our institutions, as well as our returning citizens, as well as their families. I work with women and children. The children are angry as hell. My mother and father chose drugs over me. They don't understand that, and they are angry. And they have had the family come out and say, this time things are going to be wonderful. This time I've changed, and they relapse and go back to prison. And these kids are left disappointed and angry. And we wonder why we have the issue with young people that we have. We're pretty much into the third generation of women and men being addicted on drugs, and children of those households coming out of there angry and upset with their own mental health issues as a result of growing up in households of trauma. So there's a lot of work for us to do in our faith community, that even though we can't come into the prison, or to keep us pretty busy, because of the things that the policy regulations that we have in the prison regarding volunteers and families, I think it would behoove us to develop a cadre of volunteers that's all they do, or work with the family members, so that they can help family members be able to, how do you process now having this person come home after they've been gone for 12 years or 15 years? How do they just step back into the family and now become mom again? No, they need to be able, the family needs to be able to be prepared for them coming back in. And so I think it would be great for our ministries to have a cadre of people that just do that, just work with helping the families be prepared to receive them back in the household. And how do we do that?
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Chaplain Mosley. You've probably given us like 3 or 4 more video chats that we need to get on with. Yeah, so, and thank you too for being so vulnerable with part of your own journey in this. And often what I encounter with our volunteers that want to do prison ministry is that, you know, their journey doesn't look necessarily like the folks that they're trying to be in ministry with, but there's still this commonality of vulnerability that needs to happen for that true relationship to occur. So thank you for that, and for touching on victims as well. We have to have a balanced approach, and in what you just described, those children are victims just as much, right? And so if we want to talk about prevention into criminal justice system, that right there is incredible work that needs to happen. And what I love about Mike's work up in Cleveland is you have that family dynamic as part of the stuff that you're doing as well, and recognizing that holistic piece. I love that word. And I also, you know, crime usually starts in the circle closest to you. That one I'm going to use very, very closely. I want to very quickly, because we are running out of time and we do have a few questions, but I want to ask, and several folks want to know, our chaplains also serve as coordinators for program and volunteers at their respective institutions. So they are the ones who work with the volunteers, who decide how the programming, and they work within the institution to set up the programming based on the space and the level of care and need that is required. So what are going to be your priorities as chaplains for deciding which types of programming returns first? Putting you on the spot. So, and realizing that these are uncertain times, and who knows when that's going to happen. Nobody has the answer to that. Not even Mike and Gary know when volunteers will be let back inside. But based on what you see happening right now, what are going to be the priorities for programming going back in?
I can start by saying this, and I know Chaplain Mosley's got some good points on this. Is that we don't know what things are going to look like when we reopen. I know we keep saying that, but like example, we now have a count time at 9 o'clock, which is different than what we used to have.
Okay.
So what our new normal looks like is going to allow us to know what's possible and what's not even possible.
Mm-hmm.
We know that we're still going to have Sunday services, but they might look different. We know we're still going to have some evening slots, but I don't know what our day slots are going to look like now. Again, just because times have changed. Right now, our guidelines, as far as like getting together and meeting together, for Mansfield, I think it's department wide, but I know at Mansfield, when there's red, there's no volunteers allowed, nothing like that. When we get to orange, which is 0 cases for over 3,000 inmates and staff, then we can have 10 people at a time socially distanced. So
Okay.
Depends on what you were doing before and what you're trying to do now. It's those are all going to play as factors. I know the ability for folks to fit into for some people it's just not going to work. Not that we don't want them in or they don't want to be in, but if Wednesday nights are gone for whatever reason and you can't do it, and that's we'll definitely do what we can to make accommodation. But so that's going to be a big piece, is just the willingness to be flexible to what the new normal looks like.
Yeah.
That's going to be big.
Yeah. It sounds like for groups that are getting prepared, that first off need to prepare that you're going to have smaller participant numbers, that you're going to have to figure out how to make it so that the classes or whatever, the Bible studies are, much smaller than they used to be. And like you said, be flexible in the timing of that. And we heard a little bit from our other three speakers as well, that you're doing it at 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. not when it's convenient for you as a volunteer to make that happen. So, okay. Anything else, Chaplain Harmon?
Chaplain Mosley, did you want to touch on the other faith groups we have to take into consideration?
Yes.
Yeah, because of policies that we have to make sure that all of especially the minority faith groups, such as the Jehovah's Witness, the Muslim inmates, the Wiccan inmates, are also having their needs attended to. They will certainly be allowed to come back in as well, because we don't have as many of them in our population. Being socially distant won't be too difficult for them, because they'll be able to do that. For our larger groups, it's going to be very challenging. And that's why I threw out some suggestions and ideas for other ministry that can take place as opposed to coming into the prison. One of the things I'm concerned about is the prayer, being able to have prayer with the women. We can't hold hands and pray. And so we just have to think it through. I have the women coming and praying with their hands open and holding their hands up to God, because they were accustomed to holding hands and praying. Well, we can't hold hands and pray any longer. And so we really have to be mindful of how the new normal, we're not going back to what we used to do. We have to look at moving forward, and how do we move forward in a healthy way. One of the ways I think, and I don't know if Chaplain Harmon has this available to him, but we have a breezeway outside of the chapel that we would be able to have women go outside. We would be able to have them outside and distant. And I think that would make to be able to have a few more. We're starting having prayer on the rec yard during our rec time. I put up tape and measured off 6 feet apart for each chair so that they can have prayer circles and be outside on the basketball court during their rec time if they want to pray and come together and pray, because this spiritual piece is so vitally important to the well-being of our inmates here. Our women here are really hurting and missing not having church. And so however we can have some type of church for them here, they really want to have it. One of the other chaplains, when we had our chaplains meeting, gave her a recommendation of playing music for them. So I've been playing music as they go to chow, and they have been so appreciative. They stopped me on the yard. Thank you, chaplain, for playing that music. I at least felt like I was at church or going to church. And so, as Chaplain Harmon pointed out, they may not write back, but writing them letters, I think, is really important, just to encourage them, to send some scriptures to just encourage them. Yes. Sending scriptures to encourage them, or online correspondence Bible studies. I've been looking for those. I've had them kite me and ask for correspondence Bible studies, things that they can do, because I don't believe we're ever going to go back. So we have to look at, what does ministry now look like for us moving forward? How do we move forward in a way that meets the needs of the population that we're dealing with? And certainly hygiene. I think 67% of the women here are Caucasian, they're white women. And so we need a lot of shampoo and conditioner. Their hair is a lot longer. They wash their hair a lot. And so Suave shampoo and conditioner is greatly needed here. It's not difficult to get it in here. We get it. I've been asking for it. We have women that are indigent. And so we have an indigent list. But just to be able to provide that for them, they are so appreciative of things like that. We've made, and again, I think it's important to look at legislatively, how can we help not make being poor a crime? When I'm working on my doctorate at United and did a historical foundation paper, and prisons in England started out with whole families being incarcerated because of debtors' prisons. And so when people were unable to pay their bills, they not only went to prison, but their families went as well. And honestly, we have moved back towards debtors' prison, because we are now charging in ways of trying to find ways to minimize costs. We charge them for everything. We nickel and dime that $12 state pay until there's nothing left. They have to pay for medicine. They have to pay to visit the doctor. And in some places, they have to pay for the tablets that they have. They have to pay for, in some places, they have to pay for food. So I think it's important to understand that reaching into the prison is great, but we have a large work to do on the outside as well. And so again, I just thank you all so much for your heart for the Lord. I thank you all so much for the work that you do. And I just ask that you continue to pray for us, because I believe that God is bigger than any of us, and he can do greatly beyond what we can even imagine. And so if we just put out a little bit, God will take that little bit and do much with it. So again, thank you. And Reba, thank you so much for having this. This has been so rich. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all. We have a few more minutes, and a couple of the questions that popped up were right in your wheelhouse that you were just talking about there, Chaplain Mosley. What are the proper procedures for people to be able to write somebody inside? Is there, do they go through you? Do they get names from you all? So can you kind of, and it may be a little bit different per institution, but can you kind of just give the proper procedure for, hey, I want to start writing people. And so how do I do that?
Well, Reba, you know, God is always ahead of us. And so, and because you've brought Hope Letters here to DCI, I've been putting flyers out and standing outside of the chow hall, passing out flyers to the women, and going into TPU, giving them flyers and talking to them about Hope Letters. So I have a long list of names of women that have signed up that want to be written to, that want to write, that want to engage in this program. And so I would ask anyone that wants to write that they would contact you, and that way I would still allow you to be the person that they would come to. If you don't want that, then they can contact me as the chaplain, and because I have a list of names of women that have already signed up and said, yes, I want someone to write me, then I know who to direct them to and match them up with. Mm-hmm. But again, we have to also be mindful of our policies here, that I can't match someone up. If you're on a visiting list here at DCI, then that would be problematic. You would not be able to write someone here. And so we have to always be mindful of that as well.
Yes.
I'll be able to sort that out if you contact me.
Okay. Yes, thank you. So just briefly, Hope Letters is a signature initiative of our all-in community work through the West Ohio Conference. It is open to other groups and organizations to start, and we framed it with specifically within the guidelines of the ODRC, and we have training that helps you figure out how to do this well, do it safely. And so we've started with Ohio Reformatory for Women. We're starting at Dayton Correctional at the end of the month, but we're open. But we always work through our chaplains to make sure that it's going to work properly at that institution. Chaplain Harmon, what about for Mancy?
Yeah. I want to take the opportunity as we're talking about it right now to make sure that if you're a volunteer, out of your zeal to continue ministry, that you're not violating policy. As we've had instances where that was the case. There was nothing, ill-intentioned, but it can create problems. So if you're a volunteer, please, you're on a visiting list. You can't write. With that in mind, and we've been talking about this, the reentry component necessary to keep that continuum of care going for those of you that you've been ministering to. This is a really good time to develop volunteers who are not official volunteers for ODRC, but are helpful to pick up the when someone gets out, to pick up pick up the ball and keep going. So if you're not an official ODRC volunteer, you can write. We ask that you go through us as the chaplains, and say your church has ministers that goes in, and you have some people that want to write folks. Just contact me, and I can authorize non-approved volunteers to write those inmates. So in Mancy, one thing to take into consideration is that we are scanning our mail now. So it has to be under 5 pages. So because the mail is now being copied and given to the inmates.
Right.
So that's what it would look like for us. But we don't have any official program like Hope Letters or anything like that yet.
And if anybody wants a copy of our Hope Letters manual and our Hope Letters work, it's available. I'll be happy to send it to you. It just provides a good framework for engaging in this kind of ministry in this way at this time, because it is geared toward the reentry component of, you have a group of folks at a church or whatever that is specifically writing to make that relationship prior to the release, but the hard work is on the outside, right? And developing that group's capacity to minister as people return without ever having to go inside. So that, I'm just putting that out there. And you can make it available to anybody. Let me see, and we only have a few more minutes if there are any other questions. Brian wants to know, will the guidelines ease up when a vaccine is approved?
Yeah, I mean, the world hopes so.
Exactly.
Because if the vaccine doesn't fix this, then we got some more praying to do. I'm hoping so. You know, it's I tell people on the outside, I was surprised how many phone calls I got just from friends and ministry partners wanting to know how things were going on the outside. I can tell you, walking into Mansfield Correctional, social distancing guidelines and hand washing and masks and all that are very much followed more than if you went to Walmart. So, you know, we're taking it really serious. We have plans in place. So the vaccine will obviously be a part of that plan, and I'm hoping it opens it up. But yeah, it's a matter of prayer. The official answer is we don't know. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd also like to point out that we had here at DCI, we had begun to allow the families to come back in to visit. But that was stopped because the number of COVID cases was going up. So I think what's going to drive this is not so much a vaccine, but how many people are actually infected, and what in our community, Montgomery County became red. And so you can have a vaccine, but will people take it? I've already heard there's so many people that seem to believe this is a hoax, and some have on their deathbed decided, oh, I guess it's not. And then others are very suspicious of any vaccine that will come out. We have an anti-vaccine mentality within the body of Christ, where people believe that vaccines have been responsible for children being affected with all types of diseases. And so there's this very anti-science mentality in our communities that I think will also stop some people from getting the vaccine, which will allow the disease to continue to spread. And that will drive this more so than anything else. Vaccine is irrelevant if people don't take it and they're still not following the guidelines of wearing masks and being socially distant, which and not having COVID parties and not having birthdays and funerals and going in church and everyone singing and spreading the disease, which is what has happened in Montgomery County. So we have pushed up our numbers into the red because we haven't done due diligence in our community by helping to take care of one another. So that I think we have to pray for, that our people will have a heart for one another and not say, well, it's not affecting me, so I'm not going to wear a mask. It's not affecting me, so I'm not going to be socially distant. We're going to have a party. I'm too young to get it. It's not going to affect me because I'm young. So I think we have to keep praying and putting that message out that we are our brother's keeper. We are our sister's keeper. God put us here to be in community with one another. And he said, whatever you've not done for the least of my children, you've not done it unto me. And I think the church has to be at the forefront of this message of being responsible for one another. We are responsible for one another, and we need to start living like it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. One other quick question, and then we will sign off. If I volunteer at Dayton Correctional and not Mansfield, can I write an inmate at an institution at Mansfield? So basically, can I become a letter writer to a person in an institution where I am not an approved volunteer?
There we go. Sorry. There we go again. I'm technically a millennial, but it hasn't helped me during this pandemic. Yeah, unfortunately, you would not be able to because you're an official volunteer. But again, it's a great opportunity to get to pull in more people in your church. You know, and I realize some people are hesitant to write a prisoner that they don't know because Hollywood's pretty good about you know, creating some drama, put you on the edge of your seat. But the caveat to it is you know, you don't even have to meet this person. You know, you can just write them letters and that be it. So yeah, unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to. We have had the discussion a lot of different ways about, you know, how we can maybe lift some of those barriers one day, but because we understand how it could be helpful, but the policy hasn't changed, so we would not be able to do that.
Okay, thank you. All right, I will capture notes and chats, and if there's a question that you had that was not answered, I will send it to the appropriate guest speaker and see if they can answer that question for you. Again, thank you all for participating and being on this call. For me personally, it was a very rich dynamic and conversation, and we are going to continue to create these spaces for these things to happen, because as we learned and as we continue to experience, it's going to change tomorrow. And so it's always good to go back and revisit or come back to the table as we move through this pandemic and say, okay, so now where are we? Now what's changed? What's pivoted? What's working? What quit working? What do we think needs to work going forward? So we will continue to create these spaces, and then I'm just going to put a plug in for October 1, 2, our Building Bridges Collaborative that we've been working toward, almost the last year, is going to have a 2-day where we focus on reentry and reentry needs. And we're not calling it a conference, we're calling it a community experience, because we believe that we need to be more deeply connected. Just as Chaplain Mosley said, we are our brother's keeper. And so if we can all come together and be more deeply connected around these issues of reentry and the needs and what is going to be happening going forward through the pandemic and the collateral consequences and all that, that we will be able to get out of this much better together. So we're going to be having, so put October 1, 2 on your calendar, and more details will come from that. So again, thank you all for attending. And I asked Chaplain Harmon, I've heard you pray before at an event, and would you please just close us out in prayer and send us through the rest of our week?
Sure. Make sure I'm unmuted. All right.
You are good to go.
All right.
The Lord is listening.
Dear Heavenly Father, God, you are a good God, and Lord, we're just going through so much right now with this pandemic and our families and those that you called us to serve and our employment. And Lord, this is a time where we just need to trust you, God. And I confess I've had moments of fear and I've had moments of doubt. And I just thank you for the grace of calling my name again and reminding me where my trust ultimately is. So I pray the same for everyone under the sound of my voice right now, that when we become fearful, you would call our names once again and call us, remind us who our Father is and who's in charge of all this, Lord. And we pray for the men and women behind bars, Lord. We know that you love them very much and you have not forgotten them, and their eyes are on you. Lord, I pray that you would just remind them how much they are loved by you, Lord. I pray that you would call your people to pray for those that are incarcerated, Lord, because we know it's only by your grace will we be saved. Only by your grace will our prisons become a place of hope and not a place of despair. You are at work, and we thank you. We pray that you stop the coronavirus and you set us free. Everything that binds us. In the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for attending, and especially our guest speakers. Thank you for the rich conversation today. Be blessed, to be protected, be well.